I want to talk about the CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. Yes, the institution singularly responsible for keeping Ian Hanomansing very ageless and very hot. Why are we talking about the CBC? It's an election time. Well, that's exactly it, because Pierre Poilievre wants to shut down the CBC. Not scale it back, not trim the fat, he wants to shut it down. So today, we're going to talk about the CBC in a way that matters this election. Not just as nostalgia or national pride, which by the way, I'm all here for, you saw my mug, but with the focus on CBC News, as infrastructure, as a lifeline for so many. Let's start with the language, the words that Pierre Poilievre uses when he talks about the CBC. For starters, he doesn't say shut down the CBC, he says defund. And you've probably noticed that.
And we'll save $1 billion by defunding the CBC.
I'm going to defund CBC. That's my commitment.
Why? Because it sounds like a minor trim, something you're just going to cut off the side. But it's not. It's like saying, I'm not cutting down the tree. I'm just taking the roots, the water, maybe the sunlight. Spoiler, the tree dies. Every single time the tree dies. Pierre wants plausible deniability. He wants shoulder shrugs this election, when in fact, in action, he is promising to shut down the CBC. According to Poilievre, defunding the CBC, his words, means cutting $1 billion in funding, which would essentially cripple its English language services. You might be thinking, $1 billion? That's a lot for the CBC. But take this, the CBC operates on a remarkably low budget compared to other countries with public media. In CBC and Radio Canada's case, that's about $32 per Canadian. That's 40% less than the international average. And even regardless of this efficiency, the CBC, like any public broadcaster, cannot survive without this public funding. There is no OnlyFans for investigative journalism. And if Pierre wants to keep French services, which he's thrown around to court votes in Quebec, he'll have to overhaul Canada's broadcasting law, which currently requires both English and French programming. As CBC CEO Marie-Philippe Bouchard noted,
if we are imagining like that we are going to go forward with only French, the math just doesn't work. There's a serious risk that it would, in fact, cripple not only the English service, but also the French service.
And of course, that makes sense. The CBC's English and French services share newsrooms, sourcing, infrastructure, resources. Trying to separate them, it'd be like trying to split a house, sawing it down the middle. Sure, now both sides leak, the kitchen's gone, and someone's covered in shit, stuck with half a toilet. At the end of the day, despite his words and his rhetoric, Pierre's plans are clear. Get rid of the CBC. So what happens if you actually kill the CBC? You don't just lose the National every night or the latest season of Heartland or this amazing moment in CBC history.
Every year they spend $1,000 on spooky new supplies. That's a lot more than the average person will spend, about $75 according to the Retail Council of Canada. If you want to check this place out for yourself, just take a drive or walk on by. Inverley Drive, it's just south of the Queensway. Reporting live.
I have so many questions. First of all, what? Secondly, how long has that guy been there? Thirdly, is it the same guy that let her in? We need an entire marketplace explanation for this. But folks, if the CBC goes away, we actually lose quite a bit. Killing the CBC means torching our only non-profit news backbone. If you don't like the CBC, killing it and selling off its real estate is like smashing your smoke alarm because you don't like beeping. Sure, it's satisfying to your reptilian brain, but you're not solving the problem. You're just setting yourself up for a much bigger fire. And here's the thing. We've seen this movie before. This has already happened. Let's take Australia for a moment. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, under Prime Minister John Howard, seen here gleefully descending in the polls. By the way, 10 on 10 for commitment, 0 out of 10 for core strength. But Australia's ABC, under him, faced significant funding cuts, leading to reduced local programming and more space for US and private content. Australians noticed, and by 2022, a majority supported restoring funding to the ABC. In fact, 52% of Australians wanted the multi-million-dollar cut to be restored, more than double those who opposed it. But here's the kicker. That void that was left in the 90s and early 2000s, it was filled with louder, cheaper voices. And you know who filled that vacuum in Australia the most? Rupert Murdoch, the poor Logan Roy impersonator and the creator of Fox News. So the question to ask is this: Do we want that here? Because pulling the plug on the CBC doesn't mean we're just losing something, we're inviting something else in. Which brings us to Pierre Poilievre and Donald Trump. Trump has laid out a plan in how to dismantle public media, as seen with his cuts to Voice of America and his ongoing battle with NPR and PBS. And Pierre Poilievre, he is following a similar playbook to replace the CBC with private media, American media, and hedge fund controlled outlets alongside an ever-eroding social media environment that will fill the void with less fact, more noise, and more lies. It's like replacing your family doctor with a YouTube chiropractor who yells, "Wake up, sheeple," between back cracks. It makes no sense, the cracks don't help, and you actually get much worse and then find yourself taking an online course with Andrew Tate. Okay, so why is Pierre Poilievre doing this? It's kind of simple, because the CBC is a threat, not to the public, but to him. You see, the CBC reaches about 17 million Canadians a week. It's trusted, it's credible, it asks hard questions and publishes real investigations. And Pierre, he doesn't want that. He wants content he can control, not news that he can't. Pierre wants to run against elites, but he doesn't want that scrutiny, which is why he labels the CBC as partisan and has done so multiple times. But CBC's straight news reporting is consistently rated as low-biased and factual by some media watchdogs. Their opinion pages tend to be balanced to stories leaning both left and right, depending on the subject matter. But here's what really worries Pierre Poilievre. A recent poll by Friends of Media found that 84% of Canadians consider the CBC a trusted and reliable news source, making one of the most trusted outlets in the country. It's the kind of circular firing squad logic for Pierre. We hate the CBC because it's supposedly partisan, so elect us and we'll take the partisan action required to shut it down. Pierre's plan is kind of eerily similar to Trump's tactics in the US, where public media was also targeted for political reasons. Pierre's proposed cuts of $1 billion are about 20 times more per capita than similar cuts to Trump's current ventures in the United States, showing just how drastic and crippling this plan is. Now, to be clear, the only thing Canada does 20 times better than the US is basically everything. But let's be clear, shutting down public media is not a race we need to join. But if Pierre wins, he will. See, here's how it works. There's a plan to this. First, you defund, which means you shut it down. You cut $1 billion from the CBC, which will shut down the network. Secondly, you divide. This creates a divide in the political and regional aspects of this country. Think English, French, think rural, urban. And then you replace. You fill the void with partisan media outlets that are more controllable and social media that is dragging us into the right and into the gutter. It's a strategy to create space for other media to take over that are more sympathetic and more aligned with his right-wing agenda. So what do we do? Well, first, we need to remind people what's at stake this election. Listen, the CBC, it's not perfect. Its former CEO's answers sucked about high executive pay. It definitely needs restructuring. While it's not perfect, it's also important to know the CBC is not supposed to be TikTok or YouTube or a Netflix algorithm. It's supposed to be boring sometimes. It's supposed to report on stories that matter, especially when they're complicated, uncomfortable, nuanced, or happening in places nobody else is looking. Second, we need to tell candidates in this election. You don't get to kill the truth to win power. You don't get to gut the national newsroom just because it doesn't always kiss your ass. You don't get to make our media landscape even more American just to protect your own brand. And finally, you need to vote. This election is about many things, but one of them is the future of the CBC. We know what fills the void if it disappears, and we need to elect leaders who will protect it, not dismantle it. That means you need to find who's the best to defeat the conservatives where you live. You also need to share your favorite CBC moments, what they meant to you, why they matter. And let's be clear, this episode was not a comprehensive examination of the CBC. We just focused the slightest bit on the news. But the CBC is so much more than that. It's comedy, it's culture, it's radio, it's groundbreaking shows, and for many of us, it's childhood, community, and connection. Canadians all across the country are already stepping up to defend the CBC this election. The question is, will you? Not just to keep Ian Hannamansing hot and ageless, but to protect something we know that is worth fighting for, because we already know what fills the void if we don't.